Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We're grateful to have you here tonight in Milwaukee, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Welcome to workshop number 3 of the Blockhouse Hill project called Options. My name is Eric McDonald, and I'm the Director of Community Development.
Hi everyone, and I'm Hillary Grant, Senior Planner and Heritage Officer. Thank you so much to all of you who have been coming to these sessions. And if this is your first time here tonight joining us for this project, welcome. We're so pleased to have you. Art and I are going to very quickly, review the project before we hand things over to the MacKay-Lyons team. And just a reminder that all the previous sessions, if for some reason you couldn't attend and you're new to the project, are available on our YouTube page. But before we hand things over to the MacKay-Lyons team, His Worship Mayor Myra is going to say a few words.
The town issued a request for proposals back in February 8th of 2023 this year. And after careful review, we recommended MacKay-Lyons Sweetapple architects. They bring a blend of international heritage and design expertise with local knowledge to this project.
So again, the project area is outlined on the screen. Just to be clear, this project excludes Sylvia Park and the Back Harbor Trail. These areas are already designated to remain as they are. Blockhouse Hill is within the UNESCO buffer zone, and updates on this project have been shared with Parks Canada, including the session recordings.
Tonight, we will explore potential futures for Blockhouse Hill based on your feedback. This is not a development project, it is a community design project to help council make an informed decision. We're going to see a range of options tonight that the MacKay-Lyons team have prepared, but these aren't the final options. What you see tonight will be refined based on your feedback and presented to council on January 23rd, 2024. It is council decision what happens on Blockhouse Hill.
So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite Mayor Jamie Myra to start the workshop.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. It's great, no matter what the reason is, to see this many people in the community interested in the community. We don't normally see this hall filled to this capacity for almost anything, so it's great to see. I'd like to welcome you all to the 3rd annual Blockhouse Hill engagement session. And I'm as eager to listen and watch the discussions, but before, I think there's a crucial matter that I have to address, and you've heard me address this a few times now. My commitment to maintaining a thriving democracy in our town is unwavering, just like I said back in the summer. At our council meeting on October 24th, I call on everyone to make Lunenburg a safe and inclusive space where every voice is heard and valued. We need everybody to be part of imagining the future of Lunenburg, and no one should feel apprehensive about expressing their opinions. Therefore, I'll ask you to abide by the following 3 simple rules. If you're going to speak, be a kind speaker, use words and tones that demonstrate consideration for others. Being mindful of nonverbal cues as well, like eye rolling, heavy sighing, is not appreciated. Take a moment to reflect before responding to viewpoints which you may disagree with. I think there could be 25 different views in this room tonight. Be a good listener. Give everyone an opportunity to share their thoughts without interruption, please. Instead of trying to control others with their opinions, listen closely, be curious, keep an open mind. And lastly, and probably the most important, is be a respectful participant. If criticism is necessary, direct it towards ideas rather than individuals or groups. Don't get personal here at all. Stay clear of the blame, speculation, and inflammatory language that we did hear from some at the last session. And these principles are paramount to me as the mayor. and I saw them in action at the last session at times. It was great to see so many of you with different opinions work together. For example, there was one table, and I won't bring it up here, but they disagreed completely at the beginning of the night, and then by the end of the night, they had, I thought, one of the funniest and nice presentations I saw. So again, if everybody can work with the process and be, human, really, quite frankly. Now, as a town, we want to be welcoming and inclusive. So what we're doing tonight is we won't accept or stand for any of the stuff that we heard last time if it's out of control. So if anyone, staff, consultants, myself, I guess, constituents, don't hold themselves to these 3 principles, I'll be asking you to leave. It's just that plain and simple. The process that we put in place, or the council put in place, is now 2/3 of the way through. So I ask you respectfully to follow the process tonight. And trust me when I tell you, there'll be plenty of time in the future for all of you to fill, well, you'll fill the town hall multiple times, but to fill the town hall and come at myself and your other 6 elected officials at that time when the time is right. But tonight's not that time. Tonight's the time to participate in this process and enjoy the evening and maybe have a voice in Lunenburg's future. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you very much, Mayor Myra and Hillary and Heather. I'm going to skip back. We skipped ahead here. Okay, we're excited to be back here again to show some progress on the 4 developments, the options that we've been working on. Please keep in mind, as our role as consultants, our goal is to present these 4 distinctly different options as we move forward. So tonight you'll see that we're on our way there. These workshops were designed to keep you informed as we refine the 4 options, get your feedback before the final options are presented to Town Council. So let's get into it. We have a lot to go through tonight. I'm going to start by running through some common themes, what we heard from the last workshop. Then Brian's going to take us through a look at the preliminary options. So starting with some precedents, looking at the city scale. We're going to look into the story of the Lunenburg block. And then we'll get into the development schemes as we have them now. And I'll come back a little later to run through exercise 1 with you to get your feedback on the preliminary options that we've just went through. So the 3rd section there, we're going to start looking at some housing typologies. Starting with a brief summary of the zoning restrictions. Then Brian will take us through some examples of housing types that work within the medium and high density zoning options. And finally, I'll be back at the end to go through exercise 2, which is going to get feedback from you again on what we just presented on different housing types and looking at the blocks. So that's a lot we're going to cover tonight, but I appreciate all your attendance and look forward to getting through this today. So, starting with what we heard from workshop 2. So for those of you who were unable to attend perhaps the last workshop or didn't get a chance to look at the recordings that were posted, each group, just like tonight, was kind of set at different tables, and a map of the site was given to each table, as well as a little stencil guide, just to help with scale, basically. Groups discussed open spaces, ideas on green space, potential development locations, street ideas, as well as other site amenities. So I'm just going to go through quite quickly, but at a high level, some common themes that we heard from last workshop. So the first common theme that we're looking at here was the idea of no development or only development of green space, perhaps extending the park. The second common theme was talking about green corridors. So this was an idea of connecting various green spaces, in particular Sylvia Park, down to the trail. And this was done through, one or many different green corridors. Third theme, green buffer zones. So we saw this in a couple different areas, particularly the top of the hill in this case, here, as well as this is up against Sylvia Park, the top of the hill there, an idea of a green buffer zone. And of course at the bottom of the hill as well, which was highlighted here, adjacent to the trail at the bottom of the hill. So you can see kind of the green band stretching across the bottom of the site. I kind of touched on this in the first one, but there was another comment on preserving the park at the top of the hill or extending it. So again, this is the top of the hill, we're talking about Sylvia Park. In this case, it was drawn connecting to Sylvia Park, perhaps expanding that area. So moving away from green space and parks, there was also talk about road connections. What are some options on how we might approach this site? One common one was the Oxner to Saw Pit connection. So that's kind of at the bottom of the hill there. Another common road connection, of course, was the Creighton Street all the way to Creighton Street to Saw Pit as well. Both of which, these road options keep most of it kind of mid to bottom of the hill. In addition to road connections, there was talk about trails perhaps, pedestrian walking trails. I mean, at this point, we don't know exactly where those might be, but there's an idea perhaps through some of the forested areas, connecting the green spaces, but there's a want for walking trails. Then into kind of development. So we had those block stencils, so that's what's identified here as these squares or rectangles. In these three different, I guess you'll see density options. The first one keeps kind of most of the development to the bottom of the hill. So those are highlighted in orange here at the bottom. The next we started to see kind of more mid-range, which is kind of building up from the bottom, so bottom to mid-range of hill development. And the final was a higher density, so more full coverage. But the common theme there was mostly near the bottom of the hill, not full coverage. All three of these kept a buffer you can see from the top of the hill and Sylvia Park. And a little bit more finer grain, we had some individual houses on the site, so single family detached. There was kind of two main zones that they were identified. One was to the west of the site, identified here. And the other one was to the southeast corner. You can see some idea of tiny homes or single family detached on the bottom. So that's just a brief overview of some common themes, kind of collaging them all together in what we heard from last time. And I'm actually now going to hand it over to Brian, who is going to go into the precedents looking at city scale and open spaces.
Can I make a suggestion?
Thank you.
It's hard to see the bottom of the screen.
Oh, is it?
Could you lift up the projector so the whole screen is up like this?
There should be a remote.
I'm sorry, yeah.
It probably doesn't have a motorized.
Well, you're thinking about that,
Poker pro.
is to keep the thing moving. Hi, I'm Brian.
You have to hold it though. You have to stand there all night. I don't think the fire hall's that good.
I don't think I'm going anywhere with it. I don't think there's much to be done.
So,
It was a valiant shot.
I tried my best.
so the first thing I'm gonna do very quickly is try to explain our role, what it is and what it isn't, in this process. So, as others have said, ours is a professional consultant role, it's not a political role. We're just not getting into the politics. This is an urban design study, as Arthur said, not a developer thing. And it's not an architectural study because it's at a higher level. It's about the urban scale, not the architectural detail scale. And as an urban design study, and my background's in urban design, what we're going to be showing you are what we consider good urban design models or precedents in the world. They're not necessarily, we're not saying which is the right one, we're showing you a range of things that have currency in the world, schemes that have currency in the world. So we'd never show you anything we didn't think was good architecture, good urban design. Engineering, we just want to make sure, well, first of all, Andrew is here. He's civil engineer, and he has been working with us all along on the infrastructure, particular on the roads. And basically, he can answer questions later, but basically, the general feeling is the roads we're showing you tonight are feasible. Now, in terms of economic, we're not economists. We want to make it very clear. We do have a quantity surveyor on our team. It's Hanscom, and they're Canada's most important quantity surveyor. They're going to take the work after tonight and do some costing in terms of high-level construction costs. Recognizing the shifting market conditions, you can't be very detailed, especially without detailed architecture, but they know how to do this. So we're going to bring that back to the council meeting next. And we're not housing policy experts either. We design a lot of housing, a lot of houses, but we're not housing policy people. So we're not going to try and pretend we are. The other thing we're not is landscape architects. Now there are schemes that we'll show you that are really mostly landscape schemes and not building schemes. And, let's call them park designs. So you'll see that there's a all landscape project that is as is. In other words, doesn't need a budget. And then there's a design version of it where it does need a budget. But we're not landscape architects, so we're not going to show you landscape designs tonight. The word developer comes up too in a lot of the conversations. If there are going to be developers, it'll be a long ways down the road, as Jamie has said. I'm just going to say that we should open up our minds about a broader definition. When we use the word developer, it doesn't have to be the classic developer we all fear. So we should consider non-traditional kinds of developers too, like cooperatives, just open it up. UNESCO designation, they've emphasized three things in Lunenburg. One is sustainable community. That means people have to live here, there have to be all generations, it has to be diverse, and not just the tourist center. So that's where the housing comes in, if it comes in anywheres, because there needs to be, young people need to be able to live in Lunenburg too and walk to church and walk to the grocery store. So that's one of the main tenets of the UNESCO designation. Another one is intact Old Town grid. I'm going to talk about the grid in a minute. So we have to respect the grid in anything we propose. The other one is the buffer zone, or the commons, that was supposed to wrap around the historic grid town. And we understand how important that is, and we're always trying to recognize it in the schemes that you'll see. The last thing is zoning, the word zoning. People were asking zoning, and we're going to talk a little bit about the zoning and how it works in this area, because it's important for you to understand it, important for you to understand that we understand it. So Miranda's going to do that, and there are questions that come up around zoning. We're allowed to question zoning. This study could recommend things that are different than what the current zoning says. It's just examples, like minimum lot sizes. Are they right for affordable housing? Non-conforming uses is a fancy planner word for things like daycare centers and things that are strictly speaking not allowed on this property now. And there are things that people have asked about. So, and then it may be at the end of this that some of the land gets rezoned to park from high and mid-density housing. These things are all in the air. We're allowed to think about all this stuff. No one's saying we can't think about these things. Okay, so the next. I'm going to show you very quickly some town plans that are favorites of ours, that show a kind of relationship between green space and urban fabric or housing. in particular. So this is Edinburgh in Scotland, and you can see it's both very dense, people living there, and it's an incredible network of green spaces. If anybody's not been to Edinburgh, check it out. You know, it's kind of, they call it the Athens of the North. I think Athens used to be, Greece used to be nicer than it is now. Next one. So yeah, another place that we know pretty well is the Back Bay of Boston, which has its green, Boston has a wonderful green space network in it, and also a lot of density. So next one, like that. It's one of the amazing places to live. Another one, classic, another Anglo-colonial grid town like Lunenburg is, or Charlottetown is, or St. John de Brunswick is, or Khartoum in North Africa is, or Philadelphia is, a whole bunch of them, is Savannah in Georgia. The Savannah grew on a modular neighborhood thing for hundreds and hundreds of years. And when they abandoned it, I think they wish they hadn't, because a neighborhood had its own green space. Every neighborhood had a green space. And it wasn't all lovely. I mean, they had the green space so they could muster the troops if they were attacked. But every little neighborhood has a green space. And so it's rich in green space, and it's kind of on a neighborhood scale. Next one, of course, Halifax has also a pretty good public green space network. And in all of these, you see the relationship between housing, neighborhoods, and green spaces. And here, we used to live in the city, in the north end, the old north end of Halifax. You have a very dense area right next to the Citadel. So in other words, as you go up the hill, it gets greener and greener. Next one, Lunenburg, also has this kind of network. And so I won't dwell on the Lunenburg one there. Next one, please. Okay, you may or may not know that I spent 30 years using Lunenburg as a teaching vehicle for my students. I bring my Harvard students here, students from all over the world come here and study the town, so they can learn about manners, about building an historic town. So when we did that, we looked at the story of Lunenburg, a city block in Lunenburg. So next one. So we'll zoom in. So here are 6 traditional, original Lunenburg blocks, and there was a clear model that they used when they laid this out. You got to start with a clear model because it gets fuzzy after a few hundred years. But started with this idea of these blocks and streets. Next one. Some of the streets didn't get to be streets because they were too steep. The horses and carriages couldn't get up and down. So that's what happens with colonial plans. The person drawing the plan might not have visited to find out it was a hill before he drew it. So 120 foot by 280 foot blocks. Then that means 7 lots per street, times 2 is 14 house lots per block. There are 40 by 60 foot lots. And then there's the idea of the backyards. So the idea they had was that half of the lot was meant to be a yard and half was meant to be a building. The buildings were on the street, so 30 feet deep house, 30 feet deep yard. The houses were based on a kind of prototype too, of a kind of father knows best center hall plan with a room on the 2 rooms on the street and 2 rooms on the backyard. You see the little black thing there? So Lunenburg is a very, very clear story about how you can go from a room in the house to the design of a house, to the design of a lot, to the design of a city block, and so on. So it's a wonderful pattern, and we are showing you this today because all the options we're showing you, because of the UNESCO concern about the grid, are based on it. We know what it is, and we think we should reinforce it with anything new should it happen. Okay, next one. So here's the da-da-da-da. This is the one that's going to start the tomatoes and the stuff frying. In anticipation face and I can take off my nice black. So, I said these are classic urban designs. And you'll see that they start with the highest density ones and go down to the lowest density ones. The first one we're calling the town square scheme. And you see precedents. We think precedents are great. I mean, everything's been done before, you may as well acknowledge it. So Bedford Square is in London, it's a Georgian square, so it's a green square with houses around it. Russell Square is also in London, green square, houses around it. And Alamo Square in San Francisco, those are the painted ladies, every postcard of San Francisco. Which means there should have been more of that than these 6 or 7 houses. Anyway, what's interesting about this is it's on a hill too. So next. So these are builds, and we're going to show you how they build up as schemes and with the stats. So you'll see this one starts with the roads, 35% of the site. This is the dense one. Don't freak out yet. I mean, it's going to get less dense in a minute. 32% park, that's the green here. Then the backyards are 19%. Total open space, 86%. Houses, 14%. So you can see this scheme, and it has the things that Miranda talked about. It has these linkages, these green spaces that link. It goes from the lowest density at the top, akin to the density here, and medium density. Even though this is medium density, we put low density here. And then medium density are these duplexes, and then row houses are the darker. So as the yellow gets darker, it becomes red, it gets denser. And the denser is down at the bottom of the hill. But it's interesting, we're not counting this. We're counting what's inside the black line. And you see already the densest scheme is 86% not housing. Next one. Now this is an important point Miranda said to me the other day, I just let the light went off. She said, you know, the form and the density are not exactly always the same thing. So here's a city block, 120 feet deep. That's the typical profile of the hillside. What's good about that is it gives you, if you do houses, it gives you multiple ground levels to enter on. It allows you to get to a level up here with only one flight of stairs, which the building code likes a lot. And this scheme that has 86% open, 14% houses, the housing is the same size, but this is a big house. That's a 3-story house, 3.5-story house. This is a unit over a unit, so 2 units, and this is a flat, and a bigger unit. So there's a whole question with housing about the mix of housing and the affordability and how many small ones, mediums, and so on there are. We're tending toward looking at the small ones, because we know affordability is a challenge no matter what you do. So you can see this scheme, if you, so the form's the form, and then the number of units, housing units, can be very different. Next one. Is that the, yeah, the 3D. Okay.
I was just gonna say,
Go ahead.
the thing, we know, this is a range, right? We know that a good neighborhood has a mix of all of these things. So take it as what it is, 180 to a range of
Big range.
460.
So you can see if you put those Lunenburg blocks here that bend around from the old town, put the backyards and so on, double the size of the park at the top, you know, the park, the town square. That's that animal. Now let's go to the next one. Okay, no, okay, we have 3 views. We have an aerial view here, bird's eye, and we always have a back harbor view. Next. So the densest one from the back harbor, and the really important one, buffer zone one, is from Sylvia Park. So if you go to that, you see that from Sylvia Park, even in the densest one, you see the water. And that's actually accurate. That's done off of satellite survey stuff, LiDAR, so it's like super accurate. I mean, they're not beautiful, they're just cardboard boxes we're showing here, you know. Architecture's later. Stats on it. You see we're between 96 and 288. Still a big range. And almost the whole site is green now. Then we got another one like this, which is just half. Okay, no, there's the 3D of that street at the bottom of the park. You know, maybe. I mean, it's a cheap move to show Regent's Park in London. You know, because not every architect can pull that off. And a lot of developer architects we know can't pull it off. So one of the things that is an advantage, if there's any housing, we keep saying if there's any housing, one of the advantages is the town actually owns the land. So the town can assert covenants that we would develop, because we've worked with developers. We've been developers ourselves, so we know the tricks. So we would develop covenants that would highly restrict, it would be very prescriptive, so that people had to do it properly. Because we know there are projects in the town now, in Newtown, that people are building, and they meet the zoning, but they're not, people don't like them. So one advantage of the town owning the property is that they can exert more control in the public interest. So this is a kind of one row of buildings at the bottom of the hill, near the bottom of the hill. Still a fair ways from the park. Again, there it is. You don't really see it from the Sylvia. Now, roads, park, 80% park now, backyards, and total open space 96%, housing only 4%. Now the next, and then the paths. Now the next, okay, look at this for a second. Remember, all the dark green is forest now. Okay, the study that, the housing needs study that was done, that included Lunenburg recently, said that the 5-year need is that in Lunenburg. Now it would be a mistake for a town to say, what about, not think about 20 years or 30 years. You can't just think about a 5-year plan. So, but it's interesting that you can achieve what's needed right now in Lunenburg in the way of housing in the lightest scheme we've drawn, except the next two. You just don't see it. Now, the other two, the next two schemes, and we got another one after that, are really park schemes. There's no housing on them. So this one, we're saying, I mean, think big, right? Okay, Central Park. Central Park, why we put that there is because Central Park as a whole is designed to have a whole lot of really good amenities within it. It's got baseball diamonds, it's got walks, it's got, it's got a lot, it's got a pond, it's got a lot of stuff. So we thought, and we always want to show these places in use. So here you got Hampstead Heath in London. I said I wasn't going to mention Karl Marx. He lived there. I think he's buried there somewhere. Okay, so there's the current situation. It's 100% open space, no housing. And then 4B, really, would be the next one, which is the designed version. And the only thing we said is, okay, just make it all light green because it would be, in this version, it would be developed as a public park with more amenity to it and a lot more money. I was explaining to someone the other day about this option. They said, well, yeah, that'll cost $20 million. Now, the next thing, yeah. Okay, so someone came in the office the other day, and this is a terrible drawing. Your drawing was nicer, but I didn't take it. I let you keep your drawing. And it kind of blew our minds. He said, what if you planted a forest, the whole site as a forest, and put little homes in the forest, and the Shire? And I know a lot of people think this way, and so we didn't develop it. You may tell us not to bother, or bother, in which case we'll develop it. And see, the problems with this, of course, the person who suggested it said, well, the first thing is how do you get the fire truck, how do you get the ambulance, how do you bring your groceries? And there were other ideas that these people had when they came and talked to us. One was these little red things. They said, well, community functions, like a daycare center, or a little commercial thing, or, they said, a pub. Ooh. But those things are not allowed there now. So there's another way of thinking about this whole thing. If you got the time to grow a forest, that's a kind of a scheme that's all green and still has housing. Now, this is the summary. I would need this after that story. Denzel Washington said, there was a lawyer in Philadelphia, and he said, talk to me like I'm 4 years old. And I've always lived by that, and I need that. I need that kind of simplicity in my mind too. So you can see this, and what we're going to do next, and Randall will take you through it, is rank these. So the plan that goes with this, Brenda, that comes next, right, the 6, do you want to take over?
Just before we leave this slide, just want to make sure it's clear, the naming. I know it's a little confusing because we've always been talking about 4 options. Of course, we have an A and a B for 3 and option 4. So in total, right now, we are kind of exploring what would be 6.
Plus the living in the forest one, which we haven't developed much yet.
Yes. So we have option 1, the town square. Option 2, out of sight. Option 3A is that double loaded version. So 2 sides of the street for the common crescent. 3B, common crescent is the same, but only a single loaded. So that means 1 side of the street is developed. The park, which is leaving it as is 4A. And 4B, as Brian mentioned, was kind of the designed park. Okay, so like Brian says, I'm going to bring you through exercise 1. So this exercise is going to be an individual.
Oh, would it be possible to see the pictures again?
Sure. Yeah, actually, I have a handout. But I can bring them back. You want me to run through them again quick? No problem. We did flash through them pretty quickly.
They're on the
And-
handout too, right?
Yes.
They
There's
are
a
on
little
the handout.
diagram of each of them on the handout.
Can you he just, as I'm explaining it, I can just go through it really quickly. Okay. That was option 1, the town square. Option 2, out of sight. So again, bringing the housing down the hill, the larger green space at the top of the hill. Option 3A is coming up next, which is the 2 side of the street. So I call it double loaded street, common crescent. That's 3A. 3B is that same thing, but only one side of the street. So you can see, yeah, we're on one side of the street here, so lower density of housing. And then 4A is the park as is, current. And 4B is kind of unknown at this point, but designed park is what we've been calling it, 4B.
And we were wondering, before we get you to, when we're handing out the things that allow you to rank these, and make comments at the bottom, like this one stinks, or whatever, you know. It's probably a good time to ask if there are questions of clarification. I know in architecture school, at reviews at the end of the year, you say, any questions of clarification? And that doesn't mean a critique, it means you have questions. Yes?
Is there parking included in these designs?
There would be, but we haven't figured it out yet.
Okay, because the town doesn't require
Mhm.
parking.
Well,
so-
you'll see later that we're going to show you, the second part of this, we're going to show you, zoom in on the blocks, and you'll see that we're showing where parking could go on the ground. Because we think it's important to have it.
Yeah.
Like, hello. Sorry.
Yeah, Brian, could you address infrastructure beyond roads? I mean, what about water and sewage and electricity? I mean, are these all equivalent? I know it costs more to service 200 than 100, but are there any roadblocks there?
I was really happy that Andrew's here.
I mean, inside the development, not a lot different. Outside the development, there'll be some upgrades that will have to happen, I think, to accommodate this. I'm not sure about electricity, water and sewer, for sure.
Yes.
Is there any, or could you comment on, I'll call it, the ability to evolve from one option to another? So for example, if you did 4A or B, could that evolve to 3 or to 2 easily, or does that start from scratch?
No, I think a good idea is one that could grow organically, right? And so far, it's a limit of our own imagination so far. The first couple schemes were really pulling the city block grid from the side around the contour. The other schemes were making a street at the bottom that was curved following the geometry of the trail, and that's a little bit different, but not that different. So this can grow as it has the DNA to grow. Yes, it's a very good question, I think.
I think the development agreement is important to remember in that though, because whatever we want, we need to write now in the development agreement. So it's something that can be considered, but the development agreement is pivotal, that people understand how that works. And if you have any questions from the planning department, we'd be happy to explain it to you.
How development agreements go
Yeah.
from the plan.
It's been cut on a little bit here, but like that is so pivotal to how this would play out if it went forward.
Can I ask you a question? Is a development agreement required if the town sells the land, if the town keeps the land? Because
If we sell it, it's a binding contract, so it would be between the town and the buyer,
Right.
and it goes in perpetuity.
But Mr.
And unless it was
MacKay-Lyons,
dissolved, then we control if it's dissolved.
yes. But did you suggest at some point that the town would keep the land and develop it? And that the town would be,
The town is the steward of the land now,
right,
which means it can put controls in place, like
Right.
development agreements, to make sure, and covenants, to make sure that what happens is done properly.
but if their goal is to sell the land and the land is sold, then how do you ensure restrictive covenants to that degree?
That is how the development agreement works. They exist in the town today, it's a common planning thing, we're happy to go.
Are they easily enforced?
It's it's a legal contract. It's as enforceable as any legal contract. Great.
Any other clarification questions? These are great questions. Sir?
Yeah, I didn't see anything in there for border trades. Are their buildings still gonna be there, or?
Oh, geez, that, we don't know. We didn't think about it. You know, it's a specific thing that we haven't thought about. No reason why it can't be. I mean, we're not saying it shouldn't be there or should be there. Architecturally, it could be fine, or, you know, it wasn't left off intentionally or anything like that.
Okay.
Yes?
You talk about open spaces, when you were talking about the green area, were you talking about like making it into a park area or leaving it as is? Or, I mean, what did that mean?
We could go back to one of those schemes and go walk through it a little bit. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's confusing. It's a lot of stuff here all at once. Okay. Which one do you want to use? Take your pick. One that's just a mature build-up, fully built up. So we're saying that part of what's not houses is streets and sidewalks. Part of what's housing is park, that's public. And part of what's not houses is backyards that really are private, belong to they're green.
Right.
The light green. The light green is backyards, and the darker greens are park space. So, I would say publicly owned at that.
But
Yes.
I'm
The next
sorry,
one is the one with presumed walkways, right?
Yeah.
But my question really
So
is,
you can use the parking.
sorry,
Okay.
Sorry.
but my question really is if, I mean, maybe you don't know, maybe it's open to the developer or whatever, but is it going to be developed into park or is it going to be left as?
No, I'm not.
And also, when you, I don't know if those numbers are quite right, because when you have a road and sidewalk and backyards, that's not open space for people, that's not public area.
That's why we break it out.
Right, so when you say open space, it should be just the park.
No, we're showing you all the information. And so park is 80% on that one. Park, not backyards. So in terms of, if my understanding would be, if a co-op or somebody bought this part of it, that the town still retains the ownership of the rest. So the developer doesn't get to, a developer, I don't know who this bad developer is, but maybe there's 1, 2, 3, 4 developers, or maybe this is 4 developers, and, you know, right in here. But the land that is green is not in the control of the developer. That's what you care about, I
Well,
think.
that's what I'm asking about. I'm not saying which way I care about.
Yeah, because I don't think it's right.
But I don't think that the road and the backyard should be included in the park area.
No, they're not. If we keep, go down the
Okay.
In open space, open space adds up to 3 above, so it adds up.
We're not trying to be tricky here.
I know.
Trying to be accurate.
Yeah.
Now, any other questions? These are great questions. Any other ones before we do the, yes, there's more.
Just on the same topic, but just to clarify, everything that's shown green, except the backyards, would still be owned by the city, correct?
It's my understanding, is that right?
Again, this is very preliminary stages, so again, who knows? It's really up for council to decide. So this is exactly the kind of feedback that Brian can incorporate into a report before it goes to council.
But the city would control, I mean, what's there that's shown green now basically stays as it is, owned by the city, controlled by the city. It's not-
I think that would be best to protect the public, yes, from a developer doing something else with it. Yeah, I think that would be the safest option. Don't, you know, keep it in the town, ownership. Yes, sir.
How certain are you that that will be the actual layout of the road at this point? Like, is it pretty?
Pretty
confident
good,
that
pretty
that's
good.
what
We
they're
worked
gonna
it
do?
through with the civil engineer here. Nice,
wants a few more
engineers are all
curves.
handy to have in the room. But, no, the feasibility is there, right? It needs work. I mean, all of this needs work, but if we saw a drop dead issue on roads, we would have told you. There was another question in the back of the room there.
Yes, has Parks Canada seen these designs yet?
So Parks Canada has been updated on the session schedule, and I've been sending the recordings as soon, thank you, Brian. So Parks Canada is aware of all of these sessions, the schedules. I also sent them the update of the schedule when we changed some of the dates. They've also been receiving the YouTube links after these sessions go public. So Parks Canada can watch the session start to back as they see fit.
Okay, so you haven't gotten any specific feedback on their concerns, their investor concerns on these particular options?
No, this is the first time that these designs have been seen outside the team. So again, Parks Canada will see them when the video becomes public. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, nobody's seen this stuff till tonight. Sorry, yes?
So many of you don't know me. Sorry. I want to go one step back. I'm a town planner here, and so I get to write council reports and talk about alternatives. So I just want to clarify, because I'm hearing a lot of questions that made me think maybe people don't understand this. So beyond these options, there's a higher level decision, right? So these are if we do something, essentially. So the way I see the alternatives, and I might be wrong here, I just made these notes on the fly, but the town could do absolutely nothing. Everything stays exactly as is. We have the RV park, we have Sylvia Park, we keep the status quo with all the bushes, and people go with their dogs and do whatever they want. There is a development agreement put in place as option 2. The town gets to control that. You know, we go through this recommendation process, and we do something that we all decide on and make our recommendation to council. Option 3, just sell it. Highest bidder, developer does whatever he wants, nothing from any of this matters, no DA, no one gets any say, we just take the money and run. Option 4, sell part of it. So that's what I see as the breakdown of the 4 things that could happen from this. I may be missing something, but that's the general paths that the town could take. So these are the options within number 2 or 3, have a development agreement and sell all or part of it. So that's the scope that we are working within right now. But don't forget that there are different paths. And one of them that we have heard is do nothing, keep it as is exactly today. So just those are sort of the breakdown of the 4 ways that this could all go.
Another question?
So when you say sell it all, do you council decision?
They own it, they have a land investment policy, and we can do that if they use some of those 4 options. If I were writing a council report, that would be the recommendation, and I would outline all alternatives.
Okay. We know this is
Yes. I would run away from that.
Okay, this is great. We're already an hour into tonight. I really appreciate all the questions, and hopefully you got some clarity. We're still here if you have more questions on 4 options. Sorry, 6, as we have them now. So like Brian mentioned, we are moving into exercise 1, which is an individual exercise. We have a sheet that we're going to hand out with pens shortly. I'm going to come around, that are going to show the 6 different options that we just presented. We want to get your feedback tonight. I want to make it clear, this is not a voting exercise. We are still pursuing 4 different options to move forward with and present to council. But it is a ranking exercise. So this is what your handout is going to look like. At the top there, you're going to see what we just went through. It's all named. Option 1, Town Square. Option 2, the bottom, out of sight. 3A, Commons Crescent, double loaded. 3B, Commons Crescent, single loaded. 4A, Park Current. 4B, Park Design. At the bottom of your sheet, there's going to be 6 different boxes, okay? You can write a number 1, your absolute favorite, and number 6, the one you despise the most. But all 6 listed above have to be filled in below, so we can get a clear idea of disliked and liked.
What if we don't
There's
want
also-
any of them?
I don't like any. There's a box at the bottom. Put your comments on what you like and dislike. But for us to get good feedback, we do want to have all 6 boxes filled to get a good sense of liked and disliked. And again, it's important to below to state kind of what you like and dislike of each of them, because it may be a combination of them in the end, right? Very simply, this is just a super simple example to show you. Filled in all 6 of the options from above in the ranking boxes, and then quick bullet points or whatever you might want for below to fill in likes and dislikes. So I'm gonna get the team to hand this out. This should only take 5 minutes, and then we're gonna come around and collect them, and then we're gonna move on to the next section of the tonight. Thank you. So the next part.
If I look too long, I'll change it.
Okay, we're going to move into this last part of the evening, which is talking about the housing typologies. And Tyler, when you have a second, if you could get the light down so we can see the screen. Okay, so like we said at the very beginning, to start off talking about housing typologies, we're going to start with looking at the current zoning density, or current zoning. And just at a very high level, I'm going to quickly go through that, and I'm going to hand it off to Brian to look at some examples of housing that meet those different zoning types. So we did look at the use zoning, lot zoning, form zoning, and what I'm going to go through is looking specifically at what this looks like on Blockhouse Hill for a block sizing of the 280 feet by 120 foot blocks. So that's what you see up on the screen there. Okay, so we are dealing with the minimum lot size restriction, which then on a typical block of this size gives us a maximum of 8 lots per block. The lots right now we're showing is 70 feet by 60 feet. And you'll see this as we move into the different options for housing. We have a rear setback on all of the lots of 20 feet, a side yard setback of 8 feet, and an overall maximum site coverage of 40%. So that means anywhere that the building sits in the ground, right? So it's maximum 40% coverage. So you'll see all those stats when we start moving through the different options as well. Looking at the height, I think we touched on this last time, but we also went earlier in the presentation. Building height, the maximum will be 34 feet, which you see here on the street. And then there's the option for accessory dwellings as well. And so they have their own restrictions. So that's a 4-foot side yard and backyard setback. And they come with a maximum size of 645 square feet. And that's included in site coverage as well.
Is that 4 feet
Between buildings or between lots?
This is showing the 4 feet off of the backyard and side yard right now. Yeah. So, like I said, we're gonna move into looking at medium density first. So I think you've seen the zoning map before. A large portion of the site is currently medium density zoning. We're gonna run through the typologies that fit within that zoning, starting with low density up to higher density. Within the medium density zoning, so we start with detached houses, semi-detached, which are also called duplexes, as you may know, and then looking at multi-units, so stacked townhouses, and then some different variations on a stacked unit scheme. So I'm going to pass it over to Brian to go through those. I've already gone through that too quickly.
Yeah, so in the medium density zone, we can do single detached houses. Now these are just 3 little houses that we made, and 2 of them are in Lunenburg County and 1 of them's in Utah. But they're small homes. The one on the right is 640 square feet. The one in the middle is 1,000 square feet. The one on the left is 1,200 square feet. So single-family houses can go on the block. Remember, Miranda said 8 lots per block. So without designing them, we basically just took the middle one on that photograph and put it in the center of every lot and park next to it. Add the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units. So you go from 8 lots to plus 8 accessory units to maximum 16 single-family houses on a lot, given the current zoning. Next one would be multiple detached houses. And here we're not, this one doesn't meet the zoning, it needs a zoning amendment. So we said we can dream, we're allowed to dream here, so in a bunch of ways. So if you said you could have more than 1 main building on a lot, on a single family house lot, you could do something like this, and you could get, without designing them, you could get 24 dwelling units on a block that way. Next one. So semi-detached are houses next to houses, attached, right? So you know, everybody knows this place in Halifax, and this is one of our projects in Halifax. They're basically 2.5-story townhouses, semi-detached. So 8 lots per block again. So that would be two. So that gives you 16 dwellings on a lot, on a block. And if you added the accessory units to the back, you get to 24. So this is still medium density stuff. So, yeah. Now, this same model can get denser, more dense, without changing the form, remember? So, so for 8 lots per block, this time we can stack units and attach units, so you could get 4 per, so 4 8s are 32 dwellings per block. Then add the ADU, and you get up to 40 dwellings on a city block, with room for parking and so on. Now, getting a little, just having some fun now with, you know, architecturally these could be very different from, there's a lot of options. So this is a project, an affordable housing project we're building in Cape Breton right now, called Tartan House, Miranda and me. So you could do courtyard housing, where you wrap it around a courtyard, and this just turned green. Yeah. So if this was a co-op, you know, you might live around a green courtyard. And you could, same old, you can say 4 lots per block, gets you up to 20. By the time you do the accessory units, you only have 4 lots, right? So only 4 ADUs. So you get up to 20 this way with courtyards. Either way, yeah. Then some friends of mine in New York do these things with containers. Every architecture thesis student tries to pretend they invented that. Anyway, we just did a house in Kingsburg, a 400 square foot house. And it really is a house. I mean, it's got a deck, it's got a kitchen, it's got a dining room, it's got a bathroom, it's got a bedroom, and it's got a living room. So, micro units. You can stack them up. And if you do that, you trick Arthur's rules. No, you hit 1 building per lot. They touch. They touch, right? So you can get 32 dwelling units and that kind of a thing. Plus 8 more for 40. It's the backyard thing. So if you got 8 lots, get 8 units. Okay, high density ones. Basically, you're into row houses or apartment buildings. You know, all this sort of attached and stacked, you know, is kind of in the middle. On the one end, you got a single family house that's a free standalone house, and on the other end, you got an apartment building. Now, what is the difference between an apartment building and a townhouse? In a townhouse, there's no public circulation. Everybody who lives there has got their own front door on the street and access to their own backyard. If you go in an apartment building, you've got common circulation. You've got 2 fire stairs and a corridor, maybe an elevator. So we thought we should acknowledge apartments. You know, there's always this confusion about the form of tenure. Like, if you rent it, it's an apartment. Well, maybe it's a townhouse, formally. But architecturally, an apartment is something that has common circulation, hallways and 2 sets of stairs. Okay, so row houses is how you get the density and how you get the cost effectiveness. So let's say you had 2 lots per block, 1 on each side of the block. We're going to show you row houses like this that are shallow, just 2 rooms deep. A row house is a row house is a row house. A row house has a room on the, it's always the bedroom level that defines the, so a bedroom on the street and a bedroom in the backyard side. A room in the front, room in the back, and a hallway. So that's what this is, and 40% site coverage is the maximum. So you can have townhouses like that, 20 by 25, and you'd get 26 of those if you didn't stack them. And then if you stack them, you get 52. Now, the next one is a little different. Similar, I mean, George in London is probably based on this next one. That's George in London, those pictures. Let's say you had 6 lots per block, and you made the units deeper. So in order to stay under 40% coverage, then you need to make breaks. And the breaks break it up visually and allow the cars to go into the parking and so on. So you can, and this is deep enough to have a room at the street, a room in the backyard, and a bathroom in between. You've all been in that party. You've all been in that party at that house, right? A side hall row house. Or if you can remember. So you stack them and you get 44 plus, yeah, that's it, 44. So a little less, they're deeper, they're a little bigger, a little more expensive then. You know, so this whole question of cost comes in. Next one, and you can stack them, you can do 3. Remember we got a hill here, so on the low side, you can go into a flat, affordable, accessible, wheelchair, a second affordable, accessible one off the yard, no stairs, And for people who want to climb stairs, you go up a stair and you get a 2-level unit. So that's the dense one. Then it gets you to 66. So once again, the form allows different densities. Now the next one is a small apartment building, a low-rise apartment building. I say low-rise because we've got this 32-foot height limit, which I think is awesome, like that it forces developers to do the right thing, at least in terms of scale. So there are towns, like Lunenburg is kind of owes a lot to the Hanseatic League towns around the Baltic Sea. And of course, one of the wonderful Hanseatic League towns is Bergen in Norway. So you get this kind of warehouse architecture that you get on Blue Nose Drive and Montague Street in the old town. So let's say you can do 6 lots per block. If you do the center corridor, remember an apartment building has a corridor and pair of stairs, public circulation, that's the gray. And a unit at the front, unit at the back each time however many you stack, that one gets you up to 72. Now, what that does as an urban pattern, though, is it creates kind of like a little bit like objects, kind of objects in a green field. The row houses are more continuous, like Georgian London or Edinburgh or Brooklyn in New York. So we just thought it was important to show an apartment building. If someone wants to have an apartment building where they don't have any upkeep of lawns and stuff, and just lock the door and leave, maybe that's an option. It's the highest density one. I'm not sure it's the best one architecturally. Okay, so in a certain kind of high level, that's kind of all she wrote. That's kind of all you can do. Given the rules that Miranda showed you, the zoning rules, given the height, given the minimum lot sizes, this is kind of what's possible. And give you a little glimpse into how much complexity that can result in, right? Architecturally, these could be styled differently. But that's the next level of detail. That's not the urban design level. Okay.
So that moves us right into the next exercise. Oh, there was a question.
Yeah, I had a question. Do you have an idea of the square footage in those affordable units?
In the units? Yeah, so in each of the options here, it changes. There's a footprint given, so looking at the stacked townhouse, for example, I know it's small on your screen, that's roughly 20 feet by 30 feet, and if it's only 1 story, but in some of the versions we have 2 stories per unit. So each of them shows a footprint touching the ground, which would give you the square footage for the unit.
And another level of detail, if we drove you crazy and showed you the plans that come out of that, a stair, a hall, a room at the front, room at the back, where you put the bathroom, where you put the baby's room, like it's kind of like DNA that everyone in the world knows in architecture or in urban design. So so these aren't arbitrary numbers. Like we could tell you how many bedrooms each of these can have in it. Like, you know, is this a family-sized unit or not? You know, that kind of stuff. That's another level of detail, but it falls out from these dimensions here. Yes?
Has any, in these designs, one of the things it seems to me, and I come at this from English towns, where that you have all these row houses, and one of the problems now is it was assumed that no one who bought these houses would be wealthy enough to own a car. That is not the case today. They do own cars, and it becomes more important to have a place where cars can be plugged in, because more and more people are going to have electric vehicles. And I just wondered how that would fit into any or all of these plans.
Give her the hard question.
Yeah, we started to indicate, like we had said, where parking might go. Of course, as you increase density, we're starting to lose the parking spaces, but it's absolutely a consideration as we move forward. And We are on the cusp of getting into the.
Plug-in,
Well, yes.
plug-in parking spaces.
We're on the cusp of getting into our engineers getting involved in all of this. And so the questions of how those might work, how frequently we want to have them, are discussions that we'll start to look into when we start talking about servicing the entire site. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the open space includes parking spaces, like could it, kind of following up on that? It doesn't necessarily mean green.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with the row houses, as it gets denser, like when you're not very dense, you park outdoors on the ground, it's a lot cheaper. And you park in the front part, in the building zone, not the backyard zone. I would say you park it. You don't use up your backyard with cars. When you get denser and there's less places along the street to park in from the street, then an option becomes whether this is a garage door and you can park, you can park under your unit indoors. Now that's a lot more expensive. And then the other option, of course, is to consolidate parking and make a parking structure on each block where the cars are all together. So outdoors next to your house, gets a little denser, now you gotta go underneath. And then at some point you might develop a parking structure depending on the desired parking ratio per unit. You know, there's sort of standards for this, like that more family-sized units need more cars than sub-family-sized units. You know, the bigger the units, the more likelihood they're going to have a car to have kids to drive around to hockey practice and all the rest of it. So the unit mix will affect the ratio of cars to units. Now, if this ever went into the, like if this was a developer, I like using the word developer, I like to use co-op, nicer developer. So if you know, if I was an architect working with the developer, then that would be a conversation. Do we do covered parking, or do we park on the ground? And you'd work that out with, typically work it out with your client, who's the developer. There's no guarantee we're going to be the architects for any of this, but it's kind of a farther down the line. You know, the developer would. I mean, the town right now has a very lax parking thing. You don't need any. That could change. But in lieu of that, maybe you develop a parking scheme with the person who's going to build it, the developer, whether that's a co-op or an individual. Yes?
I have a question with regards to the 62% open space. Is that reflective of the parking space?
Yes, this, okay, here the parking's on the street.
Yep.
But when it's on the site, yes, it's part of that 63%. You'd have to break it down and say, okay, how much of it is really a yard that hasn't got paving in it? And how much of it is the parking pad that is paved? So we didn't break it down like that. We didn't get down into that level. Not yet.
Just one more thing too, I forgot to mention earlier, the widths that we are currently showing for the streets do allow for parking on both sides of the streets. So we are showing wider widths for roads right now, just anticipating that you will want parking on the roads. So, yeah. Yes?
Just acknowledging that this is probably outside of your scope, have you made any thoughts on public transportation?
Not at this point, but good thing to consider. Okay, I think we've got all the questions for now. Just again want to thank everyone for hanging out around. It's been a lot of information to cover, and really appreciate all the questions too, clarification. It's really great. So our final exercise of the evening is called Build Your Block. So again, we're going to pass around some tools in a few minutes. I encourage you can work individually if you really want to work in pairs or small groups. That's completely up to you how you'd like to do this exercise. It is the last kind of exercise of the evening, so if you don't have time to stick around, that's fine as well. So Brian just took us through some examples, some different options of densities, how you might occupy the block. We looked at the yellow was kind of that single detached, we had that semi-detached duplex, and then we talked about a stacked townhouse or apartment was more the red kind of color, higher density. So your handout sheet is going to look like this. We're giving everyone, or small groups, a typical block size of 120 feet by 280 feet. You can see the sidewalk around the perimeter there. And then we have kind of an upper street and a lower street on the block. And we just did a small kind of legend off to the side for coloring, using again the same colors that we had shown in our master plan schemes. Looking at yellow, we have single detached. This is just an example of a single detached 16-foot by 32-foot house. Up here we have an accessory dwelling, 16 feet by 24. If you feel like these are too big or too small, feel free to adjust the sizes. They're just to give you kind of a rough sense of scale using some of the examples that we had earlier. Orange, kind of mid-density, is semi-detached duplex. Each of those is 20 feet by 32 feet, so side by side, there's two of them. We did include a blue color, and we've talked about this a little bit this evening, so it would be kind of a non-conforming space. We're calling it a community amenity program, whatever that may be to you. And if you want to add notes on what that is, please do so. An example of the row houses or stacked townhouses is that collection of red that you see kind of all in a row. We're showing 4 there, but you can keep going like we showed all the way across the block. Then at the bottom, an example of a low-rise apartment building. The one we showed as an example was 40 feet by 56 feet. And then just the colors that we've been using earlier. We have that lighter green color for the private green space, so that's the backyards. And then the public green space is the darker color. So I'm just going to quickly go through an example of what this might look like. Perhaps you want to have some stacked townhouses or row houses on your site, so you color in kind of some of the blocks there. Perhaps it's important to have a public pathway that cuts through the site. Again, darker green, you can go in whatever direction you want that public pathway to be. An idea of a mix, maybe we have some duplexes as well in this block with backyards, so these are private backyards. And then maybe it's important that you add some public amenity. It doesn't mean to every block, this is just looking at your typical Lunenburg block, you're kind of dreaming here for us. And so on, you just kind of keep building up your block space. So that's the exercise we have for you. We're going to pass out, I'm going to get the team as well to just pass it out. And if you'd like to work together with someone, just take one paper. If you want to work individually, please feel free to do so. And we have some crayons that match the colors here. I see there's one more question.
Can you help us understand what an accessory dwelling really means?
Granny suite.
Okay, so it can be people living there?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah, someone can live there. Good question. Or that could just be a smaller house if you prefer to use that. No, you don't need to figure out the 40% lot coverage. Thank you, good question. And I'm just gonna, we're gonna circulate around. If you have any questions, like I said, this is the last thing for the evening. So when you're done, just pass them in to us. And we really hope to see you coming out at January 23rd. We're going to have a recording of the event available as well as an absentee ranking survey. So thank you so much. It'll only take about 20 minutes. We'll be here to help.
That's good, huh?
It will help us, this exercise right now, it will help us because we don't know whether people in Lunenburg tend toward wanting freestanding houses or apartments or townhouses. These drawings are going to show us what you think people are going to want to live in, and that will help us next.